Hello, everyone. It's Wednesday, and we're already on the third day of Binance Blockchain Week. Thank you to everyone who's watching online, and we hope you've enjoyed our programming so far. My name is Brenton, and I'll be hosting today along with my co host Lindy.
Hi everyone! Today's theme is the decentralized future. So if you're excited about the promise of decentralization and DeFi, then you're in the right place. The world we live in is becoming increasingly decentralized. Everything from the way we work to the way we consume information and talk to each other online is changing. At the same time, blockchain technology is changing the way we transact, while making financial participation more accessible for all.
As we all know, decentralization is an important topic for the Binance team, and we're really excited to bring you an awesome lineup of speakers and panelists. Later today, we'll have a special presentation from Juan Benet, founder and CEO of Protocol Labs, as well as a fireside chat with Michael Saylor, chairman and CEO of MicroStrategy, who will be sharing his thoughts on Bitcoin's potential and future avenues for adoption. But before we go into our first panel of the day, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Dodo, Chromia, Frontier, EasyFi Network, AWS, Stratus, Scale Network, and Marlin for making Binance Blockchain Week possible. Lindy, can you tell our viewers how they can win special edition NFTs just by watching this event?
Definitely. So we've partnered with Dago to give away 2,000 Binance Blockchain Week NFTs, which you can redeem by scanning special QR codes that pop up on screen twice per day during our intermissions. Each QR code contains just a total of 200 NFTs, so act quickly by downloading Math Wallet if you haven't already, and get ready for our next NFT drop. A fair warning, when they are gone, they're gone, so be quick. And now for our first session, we'll be diving into the potential of blockchain technology when it comes to transparency, trust, and efficiency. Can blockchains be the right solution for governments looking to build trust and enhance internal processes? Well, please welcome moderator Monica Singer from Consensus, who will be introducing our first panelists for today.
Hello, everybody. Wow, this is the best panel that Binance is going to see at this blockchain conference because the four of us are having a lot of fun already. We got to meet each other and had a lot of conversations. So I hope that the audience will have the same fun that we had, and we are going to show you why we're having so much fun. So before we start the fun, I think that we should go around, and introduce ourselves. And let's start with Amrita. Just introduce yourself for the audience, please.
Hi, I'm Amrita Dhillon. I'm a professor of economics at King's College London. My research spans mainly the intersection of politics and economics, and I've done a lot of work on voting, theoretical work on voting games, and I've had some work with Luke on blockchain and voting.
Excellent. Luke, go for it.
Okay, yeah. My background is in a type of distributed systems from a computer science perspective. And this type of distributed systems is called multi-agent systems, and blockchain technology is one particular category of multi-agent system. So because of my PhD in that topic, I went to King's to do some blockchain and voting project for a couple of years. And now I'm head of innovation at a startup in London called Quant Network. And what we do is we provide interoperability between all different blockchain technologies. So maybe I can talk about that a bit more later.
That would be lovely. Thank you. And Jeremy.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Epstein. My day job is at the National Science Foundation in the United States, where I am responsible for oversight of academic research programs. I oversee about 900 academic research programs in cybersecurity. And my interest in particular is in security of elections and voting. And one of the topics I've written about is why blockchain is a really terrible answer for voting and elections. So Luke and I will have some, and Amrita will have some disagreements about that topic.
So can you see I've got a hard job here. I've got Jeremy totally anti, and we are sort of like in agreement. So we're going to have a massive debate. Before I proceed, I'm moderating this beautiful panel. My name is Monica Singer. I'm based in Cape Town. Can you see the background? And I'm a professor at university, but that's not my full-time job. My full-time job is to work for Consensus, which is the biggest blockchain company in the world. And I love what we're building. We're building the most awesome projects and products in nearly so many industries. And therefore, I'm so honored to be among so many incredible, intelligent people from around the world. And we're going to start the debate. And the main debate interruption. Yes.
I have to interrupt because although I'm incredible and intelligent, I forgot that I'm required to have a disclaimer. My opinions are my opinions, and I'm not speaking for the United States government, and I apologize.
That's fine. We understand that. Okay, I don't have to apologize for anything, so it's fine. And Rita and Luke, do you have to apologize? No? Nothing? Disclaimers? No?
Possibly, yeah. They're my opinions, and they might not correspond with Quad Network, but I'm going to try and say everything that corresponds with Quad Network. So I'm going to try and toe the line today.
Toe the line. You don't have to. That's fine. Be honest. Okay, so the first question, the first issue before we get into the massive debate is, how can this technology and why this technology can be used by governments? Let's concentrate on governments. I know it can be used in so many areas, but really the obsession that we all have is, how can governments embrace this technology to make things better? And let's not talk about voting. Let's talk about everything else except for voting for a little while. So, Rita, tell me, how would you, if you were the president of India, what would you do with this technology?
Well, I think that the technology certainly has a lot of uses. The key point, I think, is that it can increase trust and maybe help in reducing corruption. So, for example, real estate transactions are subject to huge amounts of corruption in various countries, and having a blockchain-based registry system with an immutable record of transactions would help maybe to audit better and to catch people who have been corrupt in this. But of course, ultimately, the key to all this is having a decentralized system and having, thinking of some stakeholders who have opposing interests who are not going to collude. So that's going to be the key thing.
So would you say, Amrita, that the reason why this is a great technology to combat corruption is because you have one version of the truth? Everybody can see at the same time, the same records. I've seen, procurement tender projects in the blockchain where you actually put even the picture of the civil servant that approves every step of the way. So if at any point in time there was any corruption found, you can pinpoint as to who actually was the culprit. That's the level of transparency that you can achieve with this technology. And of course, in real estate, the assets of the government, nobody knows who owns what. I don't know which countries know what they own. But imagine if the government could make available the complete register of properties and land that the government owns. In South Africa, we have a lot of debates on land redistribution. And I always think, why take from Peter to pay Paul? Just take stock of what you got, government, and from there you'll see you've got a lot of land that you can start giving up to the citizens that were maybe incorrectly appropriated the land many years ago. So it has a lot of uses, and I would like, for example, Luke, what would you use if you were the president of the UK? What would you do with this technology?
Well, the first thing I'd probably do is set up some infrastructure provided by government, like a blockchain-based government infrastructure. I mean, when I was working with Amrita at King's College, I know you said not to talk about voting yet, but I'm not talking directly about voting, about the setup process. So we're setting up our voting application onto a blockchain that we were making. And it was so difficult. Like, we even knew who the people should run the nodes, who they will be. But dealing with all these different IT departments of all these different universities or company partners was, very time consuming. It probably took us a year to set that up. So providing like a stable, permissioned but public government blockchain infrastructure could be very valuable. And then anyone for a company in that area can come on with their own use cases. And there's a big long list, isn't there, for efficiency. Yep.
And you know what? It requires commitment from the government. I always think, you know, if the government commits, they should be able to do it systematically. You form a committee. You know, which country has done that? UAE and Dubai. The Sheikh has totally committed to this, and they're doing it consistently. And I believe China is also fully committed to implementing blockchain solutions. Now, Jeremy, if you had the ability to be the president of the United States of America, and it's possible, anybody can be, you know, after what you had, you know, let's be honest, anybody can be a president. So what would you do? Not voting, anything else. What else would you do?
I think the real estate example is a great example, and it's mostly, I agree with what Amrita and Luke said, that there are some real advantages to it. One of the issues we have had in the United States is during historically, land records were kept on paper, and then a lot of it moved into a database. There's a third-party company, I don't remember what it is, that records all of the mortgages and loans and things like that on land and who owns land. And their records got somewhat scrambled, and it's taken a long time to recover from the disaster that happened in the 2008-2009 run-up and then the subsequent worldwide recession. So a blockchain could be very useful in that regard, and I think this is a positive example of blockchain potential usage. Having said that, in the United States, as an example, land records in general are kept not at a national level, and not even at a state level, but at a local level. There are something like 8,000 jurisdictions in the United States, each of which has the legal responsibility to maintain their land records. Now, a lot of that gets outsourced to companies, but we need to recognize that it's not a centralized thing in the same way it is in some countries. And additionally, there's another problem everywhere, which is that understanding blockchain and saying blockchain is transparent and so on is great if you have a friendly neighborhood cryptographer. Now, I don't have a friendly neighborhood cryptographer. I'm not a cryptographer myself. So telling somebody, oh, it's completely transparent and it's immutable, and this person that you've never heard of told you so, well, from the perspective of an ordinary citizen, why is it any better to say, oh, that mathematician you've never heard of says it's immutable, than the records office says that we take good care of your records? From their perspective, as an ordinary citizen, there is no difference between the two. I'm not saying there isn't technically a difference, there is. I'm saying from the perspective of the citizen, there isn't a difference. And I think this is something the blockchain community hasn't spent enough time focusing on, is how to make this understandable by ordinary citizens.
Okay.
And that's without mentioning voting. I didn't say voting even once.
Good. I'm keeping you out of that topic. I'm coming back to that one. But so you mentioned really two things that are important. One is the user experience. At this stage, it's a little bit difficult. But let's be honest, this is a very new technology. You know, when you still remember, you and I, we remember when the internet started, 94, 95, even the first mainframe, the first computers with that green screen that you had to no? It was horrible, let's be honest. We didn't want to even send an email to each other because we were all scared that the email will go into this black unknown hole. So we created the intranets, and slowly but surely, the user experience got much better. So we cannot judge a technology by the way it's looking like now, because I know that that is going to change in time, in an agile process. People will improve it. But what I really want to get into is your comment on the friendly cryptography. Look, I want you to come in here and tell me, are we saying that we cannot trust the mathematical formula that is going to make sure that people don't cheat when they create the blockchain? Is that what Jeremy is saying?
Okay.
Right.
So I'm saying two things there. I'm saying one, is that can people understand it? And the other is are there problems with the mathematical formulas and the implementation thereof? And both of those are true.
So you hope that, the blockchain implementations, they let the conflicting parties come to an agreement on the system, right? So if you develop some political government system that the government says is good and the opposite parties say is also good, then, you get that possibility a lot more in blockchain technology than you would have with a centralized closed system.
So who's the opposite side in a lands records system? You have the real estate companies all lined up on one side, and the poor individual citizens on the other, and they don't have any power. They can't afford to audit the blockchain technology. So it's not like you have co-equal parties if all the real estate companies and lenders are all lined up on one side of the equation.
So go on, Amrita.
Rita, go for it. Help.
Yeah, I was just saying that Jeremy has a habit of thinking of a very utopian situation and comparing the blockchain with that utopia. But actually, we have to compare with what exists now. And there is as much, is asymmetry in the bargaining power between real estate companies and the poor guys who own land. So we still have that. And, the question is whether blockchain improves on it or does it make it worse? So I wonder if you're saying it makes it worse.
I'm not sure that it makes it worse from the power imbalance perspective, but the hacking perspective, and there have been flaws in blockchain implementations, and we also have the looming risk of quantum computing that may break some of the crypto. And if we're completely reliant on this, when we're completely reliant on paper, we know what the threats are. They're fire, they're bugs, they're theft, they're all sorts of stuff. But when we're reliant on crypto, the threat may be a worldwide threat instead of a localized threat, where if someone comes up with a flaw in the crypto, they may break all the blockchains that are in use everywhere, not just the ones that store the records in this warehouse for this locality.
I think we still sort of know the categories of possible flaws, right? We just, like you said, they're a bit more global. You could have a global attack vector, don't you?
Yeah. One of the things we talk about in voting, and it's not a voting issue, it's just a voting terminology, is we talk about retail and wholesale attacks on voting and elections. The retail attacks are just like in the land records, where if somebody puts a spy in the land office and then they tamper with the records, change records, delete records, whatever, but they have to do it one at a time. And it can be really harmful for those individuals whose records get tampered with or whatever, but it doesn't affect the world. And then the wholesale attacks are the ones that can happen electronically that affect everybody, everyone in the country, everyone in the world. And those are the ones that blockchain, in fact, enables new classes of attacks that don't exist today, while protecting us from some classes that we have today.
Okay, there's a theory that says that's why we, at the moment, starting this journey by building in private permission ecosystems. You build these little garden walls and you play around here because you're still not ready for the public permissionless. So it's baby steps. I'm not a mathematician or a scientist, I'm an accountant, but I can see that the evolution of this technology is going to take into account the strength of this cryptography that will prevent all the things that Jeremy is predicting. Look, you are seeing into the future. Do you think that that's achievable? That eventually we will go into the mainnet, into the public permissionless, without this fear that there's a systemic risk into this technology?
I mean, you always have to know your attack threats, right? So, quantum computing might be far off, but I mean, if you want to make sure you're quantum proof now, you have to take steps for that. I mean, you can embed, so we say, quantum signatures inside current transactions now, if you want to make it a bit more secure. But It's difficult. I think you have to try with the permission systems first for use cases that are a bit sensitive, and you have to evaluate them and see if you can step up towards permissionless. But some of them might not make sense to go completely permissionless blockchains. So you need to think of a world where you can have options, really.
So Jeremy, go for it.
The reality is that people make subtle mistakes in cryptography that have huge impacts. And as an example, I want to point to what happened in Estonia a number of years, like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that, where they had to recall roughly, I think it was a third of the IDs that individual citizens had that they used for banking and government services, and yes, voting, because they had been programmed with a bad public exponent, I think it was, for the encryption key. And it was a simple mistake, but it was a really terrible one that required redoing the ID cards and the risk that all transactions that had been done by a large fraction of the population were now suspect. Well, what if those had been on a blockchain instead of using a smart card? What does that do to our blockchain risks? So I think we need to be very, very cautious about this. I am optimistic for the long term, but I'm really worried that people are saying ready, fire, aim instead of ready, aim, fire.
Okay, that I agree with you. No, it's baby steps. We all playing with this technology. In your department, Jeremy, do you find that out of the, did you say 900 people are working with you? Are they, any of them, on fire to try to research this and to improve it, especially the security?
Yeah, we definitely see research projects going on in blockchain, both projects to improve what we have, projects looking at some of the flaws. It's certainly an area of active research interest. And I think that's a good thing. We continue to fund those projects. And I hope that we don't get too far ahead with fielding things, with putting things into operation before the research is done. That's you can get the research can drag out so long that it's irrelevant, and that's a danger. But it's also a danger going into production before the research has shown what works and what doesn't. And finding that sweet spot where it's mature enough is a challenge. And I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're getting there.
Like in this technology, the way I see it is that we are very much something that we put on the table to the client, and we say, practice, touch, start playing with it. And then we do this agile process. And as the agile process happens, the client gives you feedback, you improve it. So, and maybe that's why you have to do it in a controlled environment so that, this other risk that you're talking about is not, significant. So is that the way that you are also envisaging, Amrita, for example, that projects that will be launched, they should be done, like Jeremy says, careful, don't take too long in doing, what is it, that you research so long that at the end of the day, the time has passed and it's gone. And you are a professor, a researcher. What is the methodology that you see in your students are applying now in order to take this technology into the future?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I'd like to say that it's certainly, I mean, I think the blockchain should be, there's still, research is still going on. So it's certainly not like ready to be used, but you can do pilot projects, which I think are already going on, but you can do pilot projects. For example, the example that Jeremy gave, you can always have the backup like Estonia did, with paper in voting, they always had a backup of paper ballots. So in a similar way, in the land example, also you could do it, you could also have the paper backup for the time being, first run it as a pilot and see how it's going. The other thing I didn't quite understand is, where does the exact feature of the blockchain come in his criticism, in the sense that a lot of organizations, banks and universities are already using, already digitizing so much that everything is on the cloud. So they're also vulnerable to these attacks, to these hacking attacks, which can attack, the whole. They can affect the whole world, right? So I'm not sure what exactly is it about the blockchain. Is he just talking about the fact that it's a little more complicated, or that more people are involved? But I thought having more people involved, maybe Luke can say something, but having more people involved could actually reduce the probability of having such kind of hacks. A friend of mine was also telling me about an example in banking where, when you have these global supply chains, when so many different organizations are involved, very often there is corruption of the type where the same invoice is given to various different banks, and the person can collect this money multiple times. So they're thinking of the blockchain to prevent this kind of thing. This would be a permission blockchain, and it seems to be quite a reasonable idea. So I would say, go for pilot projects and see what are the risks with it.
So, Jeremy, I really want you to answer that, because that's a very valid point. Many of the comments you have apply to today's technology. So what's your hang up with blockchain?
I agree that many of the challenges do exist, and to some extent, it's a question of, are we talking about public blockchains or private blockchains? And I think a lot of the ballyhoo that we hear, the promotion of blockchains, don't adequately differentiate between what uses of blockchain they're talking about. And I would agree with Amrita that in many cases, a private blockchain is probably no riskier than what we are doing today, and may even be better. We don't have very much experience with these blockchains to know whether they, in fact, are secure against various types of attack. A lot of times people are buying the hype without actually having the years of experience that we have with some of the other technologies. But I agree with you that in general, at a conceptual level, that a private blockchain is probably no worse than what we have today, for exactly the reasons you say.
Maybe we should think of what are the best use cases now, right? For, straight away for government-based blockchain infrastructure. I mean, I always think notarization is a very good one. Like, if you think of these, when you travel around nowadays with these PCR tests that you have to do, and you just get a stamp from a lab, no one checks it really. They just have a look as a stamp. So on you go, get on the plane. But I mean, these type of use cases could be very good.
And I entirely agree with you. And thinking about COVID passports. Yeah. So one of my sisters who lives in Israel sent me a picture of her COVID passport. She got her second vaccination yesterday, I think it was. And now they have something. It's a 2D barcode. And so they can scan it and they can then compare it. I'm not sure what it pulls up, whether it pulls up a picture of her or a reference to her passport or whatever. But yeah, I agree with you. These are things that could be done very effectively on blockchain. There is still the issue of privacy and some of these other things that haven't, in my view, been adequately addressed in the rush to have the latest shiny thing, in this case, blockchain. But there are use cases that I think make sense. One of the challenges is if you think about COVID passports, are there really competing parties, and therefore you really need to have a blockchain, or which is a fundamental aspect of a blockchain, or would a database with digital signatures be good enough?
Okay, but now I want to ask Luke, because remember, we're talking about the Internet of Value. This is not a mainframe, a central database. So the integration of the data around the world is going to be like instantaneous or easy to achieve. And that's the work you're doing. And I'm sure it's easier to do. I think that I'm not a techie, but I think that the integration is easier to do in a blockchain using the Internet of Value than trying to integrate mainframe to mainframe swift messages of different types of central databases, because I used to run one. And that was a nightmare to try to integrate with anybody. But this technology is much easier to integrate. Is that your experience, Luke?
Well, from The same technology type, definitely, yes. So if you have like two Ethereum networks, right, permissionless and permissioned, they're significantly more easy to integrate than if you do like a Ethereum to Corda integration. And that is a problem moving forward. So when these different consortiums set up with different technologies, eventually you're going to have to combine the data, and you're going to usually companies or people who want to combine it will get stuck because they won't know how to combine it. So yeah, that's one of the things that we're trying to do. So we're integrated a lot with ISO standards of blockchain technologies and distributed ledgers. So trying to standardize the data objects and the ontologies and taxonomies and of all these different blockchains, because I still think, I think it's different distributed ledgers to different distributed ledger technology can be quite difficult, especially if they're in different storage architecture, which Ethereum and Bitcoin and things, Ethereum and Corda have different UTXO and accounts. I don't know, for you in Consensus, do you find many challenges when you integrate with non-Ethereum things, or do you do that, or do you set it?
As you know, we build the bridge with the Hyperledger. So Hyperledger and Basil, it's all done. But the problem with the R3 Corda is that it's not a blockchain. So that's a problem. So, but they are really trying to keep now a definitional standard so the integration can happen much simpler. So that's going to happen. But that is our main criticism of R3, So now we only have, let's say, 15 minutes. So I'm going to venture myself into the debate, the real debate that you all dying to talk about. But I'm going to start with Amrita. Amrita, I want you to tell us your experience on your research that you did at the university on voting. Tell me what happened. Tell me what you felt before you get destroyed by, yeah.
You mean voting and the blockchain? Yes. Well, yeah. So I think that blockchain has some potential. I'm talking from the perspective of developing countries where institutions are relatively weak, and so trust in government can be a big issue, especially with authoritarian governments. And so this seems like a situation where a blockchain would help a lot to increase citizens' trust in the system. So first of all, looking at whether electronic voting is better than paper ballot voting. Paper ballot voting has been going on for decades, for centuries, and everything else has moved on, but voting is still, paper ballot based in many developed countries. And I want to argue that maybe there is a potential for electronic voting. So countries like Brazil and India have tried it. There has been some research on electronic voting in Brazil, which showed that it helps to enfranchise more citizens, so the poorer citizens, more marginalized people, and that it led to an increase in expenditure on health by the government. So it had a positive effect. And this is a centralized, e-voting system. And in India, on the other hand, you have these electronic voting machines. I mean, they've almost become a necessity because the country is so large and the population is so big that, doing it with paper ballots could take a huge amount of time, in which, the longer the time interval, the more there is a scope for manipulation. So that's also an issue. And already these EVMs are already showing that, the research is showing that there is less booth captures because it's more costly to capture booths. So there is already some improvement. But, I think there is still a danger that the system can be manipulated just because it is central, because it is controlled by a few firms or a few insiders. And so having a blockchain based system where you have different parties as stakeholders in the consensus protocol should help to improve matters and prevent manipulation to this degree. But of course, I agree that the research is not yet there, and it's still not at that level, and you probably need the backup system as well.
Amrita, so is that the study that you guys did at the university? What you just discussed, was that your findings?
No, at the university. So my first research was on more of a perspective on voting and the blockchain. So what is the state of the art? How what's the research on what has been done in voting and the blockchain? But the other more original research is also to show that with the blockchain you can have voting rules that are more that are better, and which you can't do at the moment with paper ballots because it just takes too much time. So the example that we had was, if you have referendums, then the blockchain allows you to securely delegate your vote to other people. And so if you are somebody who's not very informed about a particular referendum, you can choose somebody else, maybe that or that who's advertised as somebody who's an informed citizen. You can delegate your vote to them, and in that way, the information that is aggregated in the election is much better than in the normal single vote system.
Fascinating. So now, Jeremy, the floor is yours. Tell us why you think this is not going to work. And yes, and also tell us a little bit about what happened in America in the elections, and all your stories I really think are fascinating.
Yeah, well, we had a major election in the United States recently, as some of you may have heard, and for people like me who have spent a decade or more campaigning for paper and against the electronic voting machines, this was a real win for the technology. I'm not talking about who won, I'm talking about the technology, because it was fascinating after the election was over, where there was no, everyone looked at it and said, we have the paper ballots, let's count them. There were debates about which ones we should count and which ones we shouldn't count because of this rule or that rule. But everyone we knew what the voters wanted. We just needed to decide which ones to count. Had we been in an electronic system, the way they have in India and in many other countries, or some other countries, it would have been much more unclear, because we would have had to worry about, have they been hacked or not? And we know that these systems do get hacked. The system in India, it was shown, is fairly easily hackable. The system in Brazil was easily hackable. The systems that have been used for many years in the US, in many cases, were very easily hackable. There was one where you didn't even need to touch it. You could, as long as you were within 100 meters or so of the machine, you could manipulate the votes without ever being detected because of it had open Wi-Fi on the voting machine. I'm not making this up. This actually was the case. So the fact that we had paper is what frankly, saved democracy in the United States. And that has a big impact on the world. So I'm really glad we had paper that we could count, and we can argue about which ones were right and what the rules should be for early voting and ballots after the election, et cetera. The problem, and I agree with Amrita, that the booth capture, which for those people who aren't familiar with that terminology, it means basically someone comes in with a gun and says, give me the ballot box, and here's a new one in its place. And if you don't exchange them, then I kill you. And so people exchange ballot boxes. Now, whether it's a physical ballot box full of pieces of paper or an electronic ballot box, meaning a computer system that has totals in it, that's not really all that different. In either case, it's manipulation using violence as a way to force changes. And that can happen in both cases. I agree it's a bigger risk in certain developing countries than in more developed countries, but it can happen. I have to disagree with Amrita, incidentally, about the time for counting. The British experience has shown us that if you use bank tellers who are expert counters of things, they can count votes very, very quickly. Turns out it doesn't work very well, ironically, in the US, because we tend to have more complicated elections. In California, it's not uncommon to have 100 different things on the ballot, not 100 candidates, but 100 different things that are voted on. And so that makes counting very time consuming, but it's not, in general, it's not that big a deal. And ironically, I think I want to disagree with Amrita on the issue of enabling voting for the poor. And maybe it's true in some countries. I know when we've looked at it in the US and in other developed countries, introducing online voting, whether it's blockchain voting or any other sort of online voting, enables the wealthy and disenfranchises the poor, who are less likely to have access to smartphones, to computers, etc. And so it exacerbates the divide that's already there between rich and poor. It doesn't make it better, it makes it worse. And finally, one of the big concerns I have with any form of a blockchain voting system, because they necessarily connect identity to votes, even if the vote is encrypted, it is somehow associated with identity, is if your vote gets associated with you, even years later, it can have substantial implications. Think of what we're seeing with the protests in Russia now, and people there. If someone can tell that they voted for an opposition candidate, they're likely to get locked up or worse. It is really crucially important that we have secret ballots, and I believe that using blockchain in many different respects increases the risk of long-term loss of the secret ballot.
Luke, do you want to add to anything that has been said so far?
There's a couple of things I wrote down. So, I mean, this idea of, you can find out what you voted later. I mean, you probably can. I guess you just need to define the voting protocols, and then you can try and find voting protocols to stop these things that you want to stop. So I remember that our voting system was designed so that it was like, I think it was basically impossible. I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it was basically impossible for any sort of vote buying or collusion thing to succeed, because of the way we not just shuffled things, but we let the person who made the vote, the voter, be able to sort of trick any possible buyer into thinking that they voted differently. So we gave them the out there in that voting protocol that we implemented. But okay, about blockchain in US elections, I mean, you think though that there's a place to at least help them a bit, because I mean, you have paper and your democracy succeeded, but it was just about. I mean, surely if you minimize the attacks, the possible lines of attacks, like if you had some sort of agreement on at least the people who were voting were not dead, I mean, that might be a start. I don't know. You seem that there could be places, little bits that blockchain could help with for now, and then maybe in the future you could use it for more stuff. But who knows? But
I agree with the first half of your sentence, Luke. There are things where blockchain could be useful for now in voting. It could be useful in voter registration records so that we have evidence. And there has been history of people being deregistered without their consent. Blockchain could provide us with useful capabilities there. My objection isn't to blockchain in elections writ large. My objection is to a use of blockchain for voting.
Yeah, okay.
So, we only have 2 minutes. So can I conclude and say that blockchain is great in terms of uses that government can apply? It's still very nascent. It's still baby steps. The experts, technologists are saying, guys, be careful. There are lots of bugs, lots of problems. I get it. So we are accepting this is the beginning of the journey. And I really buy into Jeremy's point on the fact that that this technology was built for transparency purposes. If you want to keep the ballots secret, it's not so relevant, and maybe we should be thinking about a different type of technology, or against my common sense, paper. I don't like paper. So maybe we need a backup paper for a long time, because in reality it's about the secrecy that we need to keep for the results of the voting. But that doesn't mean that for other use cases, especially in government, this technology can actually bring incredible improvement in the lives of people. Like Amrita in India, I really think that this technology can bring massive improvement. Your country is very much agricultural, so imagine bringing supply chain to the farmers from a simple cell phone. They'll be able to track the harvest up to the point of sale, get paid immediately, real time. The fact that in America they distributed this money for people suffering from COVID, and it was put in a check in the post. Really, they should have done that electronically. There's so many ways, okay, that this technology can be a game changer to improve the lives of people. So yes, I agree, Jeremy. I give you all the credit. Don't use it for voting. So use it for everything else except for the voting. Can we conclude that that's a good one? Just I want to hear, Jeremy, do you agree that it's a great technology for other purposes, but not for voting?
It's a great technology for many purposes, not including voting. I'm not going to go as far as you are. I think a lot of it is oversold.
Okay.
There's a great flow chart I have that I would be happy to share with anyone who's watching this video if you drop me an email to help you decide, is blockchain a good solution, or do you really need an encrypted database or a distributed database? There are many cases where it's being used where it's not an appropriate technology, but there are many places where it is an appropriate technology.
I agree. I think we all agree. And Rita, Luke, what do you think? We can agree with that too, eh? Cool. Excellent, guys.
I was gonna say, I thought Rita might have some point about that on voting.
Guys, we run out of time. I want to thank my panelists. You guys were great. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Keep well. I'm going to close the session. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.
What a great spirited debate. We've got lots of interesting perspectives here. One thing we can say for sure is the potential of blockchain-powered voting and record keeping is undeniable. But as with any new technology, it's not without its risks.
I agree. That was such a great panel to start day 3 on. So much energy. So next up, we have a keynote on high potential scaling solutions that can improve the performance and usability of DeFi and the decentralized web. Please welcome Roshan Raghupathy from our sponsor, Marlin.
Hi guys, this is Roshan, the CTO at Marlin. And today I'm very happy to be here at the Binance Blockchain Week to talk about the pond below the blue sky. In particular, the horizon where decentralization meets performance. So if this all sounds too metaphorical, let me just break it down for you. So Blue Sky, as some of you may know, is a decentralized social networking standard Twitter is working on. The goal is to let the community and not a single company decide on controversial topics like whether or not Trump should be banned from a social network, or whether a certain picture is abusive, or if a comment is factually misleading. So these ideals, as we all know, are no different from Bitcoin, which empowers individuals with a similar degree of financial sovereignty. Storage solutions such as RV, Filecoin, etc. enable data to be stored across paired devices in the globe, making data immune to being wiped off or made inaccessible by any particular company or government or even a natural hazard. So it's these technological developments that are set to mark the transition from Web 2 to Web 3. So the crux of this shift is the reduced reliance on the correctness of operation of any single party, so that no single school of thought or even regulatory compulsion can restrict the access of any particular segment of the society. However, achieving such degrees of decentralization is not possible when data is stored in the servers of a few large companies, or when nodes are operated by individuals residing in just a few jurisdictions. And that's what decentralization represents, like thousands of nodes run by different entities spread over 100 countries, so that the rules of a single company or country can't really pose an encumbrance to the sovereignty of any particular individual. This, however, begs the question, is Web3 ready? As you may recall, a few years back, CryptoKitties once congested Ethereum, and of late, every time a new DeFi project is launched, gas prices just shoot through the roof. And these applications hardly consume a few kilobytes of data. Bigger scale applications, on the other hand, consume like gigabytes of data per minute. So, is Web3 even ready to handle such heavy-duty applications? You may say, sure, there are alternate chains, but are they decentralized? There are layer 2 solutions, but do they infinitely scale? Plasma, for example, is semi-permissioned, and rollups are limited to like roughly 2500 transactions a second. So it's true that a decentralized Twitter or CryptoKitties won't be storing all its data on the blockchain with a replication factor of like thousands of nodes. But they would still have to fetch data from nodes which are spread across the globe. This brings us to a critical realization that decentralization is not only about building an extremely redundant and distributed storage and processing network, but also requires extremely good communication networks for smooth user experiences. And user experiences are directly related to network latency and bandwidth. So let's take, for example, our experiments with the graph protocol. So in a host with like 150 Mbps uplink and downlink, it takes around 10.5 seconds to open uniswap.info web page. And these are just simple textual non-media queries. So imagine how long it would take for like images and videos to load in a decentralized Twitter. So this is not an acceptable scenario, since it's been observed that probabilities of a page bounce go up wildly as the page load time increases. The same applies to block propagation, where blocks from one producer need to be propagated across to all the other nodes in the network. Like the delays therein and the limitations on block size that this imposes is what the famous Bitcoin block size debate is all about. The network latencies also lead to like interesting front-running opportunities in DeFi. Like the left picture over here shows two bots which are trying to outbid each other on gas price to win an arbitrage. And the pictures to the right show how chances of like traders winning a liquidation opportunity has been reducing with time, as different bots basically compete on the network layer and have increasing failure rates. So such networking ratios aren't really unique to Web3 either. In fact, the flash crowd phenomena, where many users try to access the internet at the same time, leading to a bottleneck, is something that researchers wondered about even during the early days of the internet, leading to the term World Wide Wait. But the internet has always been performance first, with sovereignty being secondary. Like a number of networking companies, including CDNs, SD-WANs, etc., focused on optimizing the internet and were further early in its stage. On the other hand, Web3 has been focused on self-sovereignty and robustness, with performance kind of taking a backseat, which makes sense. But with layer 0 solutions such as Marlin, we make a foray into discovering scaling solutions that don't necessarily compromise the ethos of decentralization. So by optimizing the base peer-to-peer layer itself, we try to circumvent the restrictions imposed by the scalability trilemma, like a high throughput block relay, low latency transaction relay, mempulsing, etc. all contribute to making dApps much more scalable and user-friendly. So we invite you to come participate in the network as a validator, user, or a staker. We have gateways built for a number of chains and are currently distributing tokens by mechanism of a straight drop. You can basically earn pawn tokens by delegating tokens such as Near, Dot, Atoms, etc. to validators who install Marlin gateways. We're also in the midst of launching staking for our own network, where you can run infrastructure as well as put your earned tokens to use. And as always, reach out to us if you have any feedback or questions. Happy to chat. Thanks a lot.
Meet the new builder. In the new age of rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty. They're in labs, lofts, and war rooms, launching scrappy startups and reinventing big business. They see what doesn't exist, and they make it exist. They know the question isn't if, but when. They know the freedom to fail is the freedom to build, and they don't freak out when they run into a problem. These are the new builders, and we're the cloud that's obsessed with turning their dreams into realities. With the most capabilities, the most innovation, the most customers, and the most experience. We're the cloud that breaks down barriers. When others say no, we let builders say yes. Because we believe everything gets better when you let nothing stand in the builder's way. Amazon Web Services. Build on.
Thanks, Roshan. I think a key reason why so many people are excited about Web3 is because it promises to deliver next level user privilege. These are qualities that users are demanding more and more of.
Agreed. And adding performance and scalability to the equation will make Web3 adoption and DeFi participation that much easier. So next up, we have something many viewers have been looking forward to. We're excited to introduce our Fireside Chat with Michael Saylor, hosted by Ana Herrera from Reuters. Over to you, Ana.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Binance Blockchain Week. My name is Ana Herrera. I'm a reporter at Reuters, where I cover fintech, including crypto. And I'm here with Michael Saylor, the CEO of MicroStrategy. The company has been making news in the past sort of months because it has been acquiring a lot of Bitcoin. So we're going to try to get behind the scenes, if Michael will let us, to know what their strategy is and learn a bit more what his thoughts are on Bitcoin. So hi, Michael.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So do you want to maybe just give us an overview about why MicroStrategy has been buying Bitcoin and how that came to be?
Well, I think our assessment of the macroeconomic situation evolved after March of 2020. And our conclusion is that for the next 5 years, we're going to be in an environment of monetary expansion. My best estimate would be 15% per year. Lots of people have other estimates, can range from 10 to 15% or more, but I don't think anybody thinks that we're not going to have aggressive monetary expansion in the US and Europe. So in that situation, what we're seeing is a debasement of the purchasing power of currencies against scarce assets. We, as a company, had a very large cash position in our treasury. And our traditional strategy had been to invest in sovereign debt in an environment where the money supply was expanding about 5% a year. So we were generating 2 or 3% interest against a 5% cost of capital. But in the current environment, sovereign debt yields on short term less than 1%, and the cost of capital went to 15%. And so that means, in essence, you're losing 14 to 15% of shareholder value on the cash balance every single year. And because we didn't want to see such a loss of shareholder value, we started looking for some investment strategy. And after we sifted through debt and we found there's no debt that will give you cost of capital or return greater than 15%, we went and looked at stocks and real estate, and the risk and execution challenges of stocks are too difficult. So then we considered derivatives, and we couldn't find any derivatives that made sense. And then we considered precious metals and like gold, but the returns on gold didn't look nearly as compelling as Bitcoin. And so we eventually found crypto because in essence, in the crypto world, you could create a digital gold, and Bitcoin is that digital gold. And so if you're looking for a non-fiat derivative store of value in an inflationary environment, then it's logical that you would settle upon Bitcoin as digital gold.
So obviously, you mentioned other types of investments and the returns that Bitcoin could have. It's been going up gradually or steadily from its inception, and obviously it's had spikes, but there have been years where the price has gone down and there haven't been increases. So how do you manage that risk? And are you worried, obviously, that there might be another dip and what that means for your company?
We're not traders and we don't have a short-term time horizon. So if you were trading with 10-to-1 leverage or 20-to-1 leverage, and you didn't have permanent capital, you'd be concerned about volatility on a day-to-day basis. But we were making a 10-year investment. And if you look at Bitcoin over the course of 10 years, it's not volatile at all. It's just going up. In fact, it's just going up over the course of 4 years, And so it really comes down to time preference. And if you're an investor, then you probably have at least a 4-year time horizon, in which case near-term volatility isn't really consequential. The things that make volatility consequential would be leverage and short time horizon. And since we have a long time horizon and no leverage, we're really concerned about alpha. We're concerned about, will it go up as opposed to will it go up in a stable fashion. If we want to avoid volatility, we could keep the cash, but we'd be 90% certain that we would lose 75% of our value over 10 years. Right? That's the price of stability. Volatility is the price you pay in order to get appreciation.
So are you personally an investor in Bitcoin? Like, how did you get to know crypto? And because you make it sound very logical, but obviously it's far from what many other companies are doing at this stage, right? So,
well, I am a personal investor in Bitcoin. If you had asked me what I thought about Bitcoin in February of 2020, I would have said, Bitcoin is some kind of nuisance cyber digital thing, crypto thing, right? I wouldn't have really had a strong opinion. My mind was elsewhere. I wasn't well educated on the subject. I think Bitcoin is a solution to a problem, but you have to have the problem to appreciate the solution. So the problem became pretty paramount in March. When the cost of capital goes from 5% to 15% for every company on Earth, now you have to find a treasury solution that will yield more than 15%. So we didn't really have that problem before March. And if you didn't have a lot of cash on your balance sheet, you didn't have that problem after March. And if you're not sensitive to macroeconomics, or if you didn't have the bandwidth to focus on it, you still wouldn't have thought about it. So I think that my education process started after March because we had the problem, because we had the bandwidth to focus on it. And once you do focus on it, you conclude Bitcoin is digital gold. It's a store of value against monetary inflation. Any corporation, public or private, with a treasury that's cash rich is got a debasement problem. So they've all got to solve the problem with the store of value. This is a logical solution to the store of value problem. It's the same, by the way, for an individual. So if you have a personal treasury, you have a savings account for your family or yourself, you have the same problem. I think every Robin Hood investor knows that if they keep all their money in cash, it's going to be worth less next year than it is this year. And if they hold their money in cash for 10 years, it won't buy anything. So they have to become an investor. And we're all of us, individuals and corporations and endowments and institutions, are all forced to solve the problem of how do we store value in an environment of monetary inflation.
So how does this reconcile, I guess, your view and this view that has emerged more over the past year with, the original idea that Bitcoin was a form of payment? And there are companies that are, notably PayPal, you'll be starting, like consumers that use PayPal will be able to pay with Bitcoin. So it seems like the two are a big contrast, right? If I know MicroStrategy is holding on to it for 10 years because it thinks it will go up, why would I buy coffee or shoes or shirts or whatever on the internet with it? It would make no sense. Can the two sides of it reconcile, or will one take over?
I think there was a debate in the early years all through the Bitcoin forks over whether or not Bitcoin was a store of value or Bitcoin was a medium of exchange or a payment network. I think that debate has been settled. Bitcoin is not a medium of exchange. Bitcoin is a store of value. It doesn't make sense to use a blockchain to pay for a cup of coffee. It does make sense to use a blockchain to store $500 million for a decade, right? I mean, it's a very secure, very efficient mechanism for moving large amounts of value, large amounts of money over time or over space. If I wanted to move $1 billion, 10,000 miles, the blockchain is a better idea than gold. And it's a better idea than traditional banking networks because it's a non-sovereign crypto network for settlement. So it makes sense to move $1 billion from New York to Tokyo on the Bitcoin blockchain. If I wanted to move $1 billion 10 years into the future or 100 years in the future, that also makes a lot of sense. It's very efficient. You put it on the blockchain, you'll never have more than 21 million Bitcoin. 100 years from now, you'll have that portion of the entire Bitcoin ecosystem. And so it's a good idea for moving large sums of money over time and space on a very secure network. It's not a very good idea for moving small sums of money over short periods of time or over a crypto network. If I really want to pay for a cup of coffee, I'm going to have 97 million transactions a day. You should probably do it on Apple Pay, Square Cash, PayPal, MasterCard, or Visa, because it's a problem that's solved already. And it's solved by Alipay and Square and Google and Apple. They do it pretty well. It's not a problem. It's not going to be a problem. And it's only 1% of your money. So yes, there are people in the community that really would like for Bitcoin to be the medium of exchange for day-to-day payments. It doesn't need to be, and it isn't right now. And human civilization is not threatened by the lack of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. The world is not going to not drink coffee tomorrow because we're not using Bitcoin. The world will drink coffee just fine. On the other hand, 7.8 billion people need a store of value because every one of them is getting paid in a currency which is going to be weaker in 12 months than it is today. If you look at the news this morning, the average home in America is like 10% more expensive than it was 12 months ago. There's no inflation unless you want to buy something going up in price. Homes are going up in price. Everybody knows that it's going to cost more in 5 years to buy the things that they want to buy. So every individual needs a store of value. Bitcoin is that solution. Every corporation needs a store of value. Bitcoin is that solution. People need it, right? But they need it. They don't need transactions. They need it to be thermodynamically sound money across time.
I'm sure there will be many people or Bitcoin maximalists who will disagree passionately with this, which makes it a fun, I guess, industry to cover. But what about other cryptocurrencies? Because obviously, if you think, Bitcoin is there's scarcity, and that's what makes it a good store of value. But also, then there's a finite amount, and you're thinking like, are the people that have it now the ones who will keep having it forever? And you're sort of thinking, is there an option for other currencies, cryptos, to evolve and become other stores of value, or not really?
Yeah, so to be clear, like the world desperately needs digital gold. It needs a non-sovereign bearer instrument that's a store of value that is not a fiat derivative. The world needs it desperately. How bad does it need it? It needs $250 trillion worth of it. It's the biggest requirement financially in our lifetimes. It's much bigger than gold. It's all of the safe haven assets, and they're all threatened. So that's a fundamental need for every investor on the planet and every person on the planet. It is the existential biggest, hugest, most significant issue by orders of magnitude. The other things, can I actually pay for a cup of coffee with something, with a crypto network instead of Apple Pay? It's an interesting thing. And I'm not against it. One day, for example, we may solve the problem of how you do payments with other cryptos that are faster, or we may solve the problem with layer 2 solutions like Lightning, and that's fine, right? And for maximalists that want to actually do more than serve as a store of value, I think that they will need to do the more with other technology. You'll either need to do the more with a layer 2 scaling solution, or you'll need to do more with another crypto asset. And crypto assets can do other things, right? There's more than just store of value. There's privacy. There's smart contracts. There's provenance. There's license. So there are a lot of other things that people can and will work on. I believe that it's good for people to continue to develop all those things. It's a very competitive market. So if you're going to develop a layer 2 scaling solution for medium of exchange to do billions and billions of transactions for a Satoshi, you're going to have to compete with Apple Pay and Square and PayPal and Alipay and Amazon and Google and Facebook. It will be competitive. And if it's a unique solution and the market values it, then it will grow and it will be successful. And those same solutions will compete with the other cryptocurrencies you've suggested. So I welcome innovation. It would be a mistake to not recognize the single most important issue in the entire human civilization is we don't all freeze to death and suffocate. And if the value flows out of all assets because the currency collapses, civilization ends, right? So for example, if you owned every single thing in Zimbabwe and the currency goes to zero, what do you have? And if you own every single thing in Venezuela and the currency goes to zero, or if you have the Weimar Republic and everything in Germany and the currency goes to zero, what do you have? And the same is true in Argentina. If the currency goes to zero, what do we have? And the answer is you have nothing, right? Zero. Every other virtue on this planet relies upon some stable store of value. It's the oxygen through which the human civilization functions. So I don't call myself a maximalist in the sense that other crypto assets don't have a place or other scaling solutions don't have a place. That's not the way I think of it. I just think there's one problem that's bigger than every other problem, a bigger market, a bigger need. It's a simple problem. It's how do we store monetary energy over long periods of time such that we can build companies and real estate and civilizations and cultures and families and things of beauty and institutions on top of that store of value. That's the problem needs to be solved. And Bitcoin is the solution to that problem.
So who or what helped you shape your view? Because it seems you went from like February thinking it was just crazy internet money to now thinking it kind of is the solution to global inflation and if we get to a Weimar Republic sort of state, which considering the year we've had now, it doesn't seem too crazy for how things will evolve. But what happened?
I've lost money in banks that collapsed in South America. I have, and so I understand counterparty risk with banks. I have lost large sums of money doing business in Argentina, not once, but twice. 20 years ago when the currency collapsed and was devalued, and of late when the currency collapsed and was devalued. So I have some experience with currency collapses. And I've experienced with bank failures and counterparty risk. The difference is, in the previous circumstances, the safe haven was the US dollar, and the dollar was not losing more than 5% of its purchasing power a year. And so it was possible to address the problem by saying, we'll just put our money in safer banks and we'll convert our money to the dollar and we'll move our money to the United States. I think the difference after March is that now we realize that the US dollar is, it was inflated by 25% in 12 months. So if you went from 5% monetary inflation to 25% monetary inflation, and if you see asset inflation, if houses are going up in price by 10 or more percent a year, and if assets like stocks and bonds and real estate are going up, commercial real estate that is, are going up by more than 10%, and we see every monetary index at an all-time high, right? The Dow, the S&P, all the stock indexes, the NASDAQ. We see stocks that have flat revenues that the stock value is double, right? So you see asset inflation all around, and it is the greatest amount of inflation in the last 30 years, I think. And there is no safe haven. You can't just say, well, I don't have my money in Zimbabwe, therefore I'm safe. I don't have my money in Argentina, therefore I'm safe.
But why can't it be just normal gold then? Sorry, this might be a very dumb question, but I'm just thinking, you have gold, you have that's certainly what a gold bug would say, just buy gold, right?
Yeah, the theoretical solution to the debasement of fiat currency is not a non-fiat derivative, right? Stocks, bonds, and real estate that generate cash flows in fiat currency are fiat derivatives. So owning all of the businesses in Argentina, or all the companies in Venezuela, if the bolivar goes to zero, isn't going to save you, right? So you have to find a store of value that's not fiat. So the traditional one for 5,000 years was gold. And gold, that was the gold standard. And the positive was it's agreed upon store of value by wealthy individuals for 5,000 years. That's why we all wanted gold. The problem is it's corruptible, it's centralized, and it's heavy. So if I have $100 million worth of gold, that's 3,000 pounds at today's prices. You can't program it. You can't move it at the speed of light. You can't store it in more than a handful of places in the world. It's very difficult to verify it. So you can't be sure that the bank you stored it in still owns that gold, and you can't be sure that someone hasn't issued gold notes and hypothecated it. So gold is inflatable. It's inflatable by banks. They can issue gold notes, and by governments they can sell gold naked short. It's also inflatable by miners. Miners can create more gold. And it's not programmable, it's not portable, and it's not easy to assay. So these things all made it too slow for 20th century business. For 19th century business, if you moved slow, then maybe, but in the 20th century, we wrapped a layer of fiat instruments or derivatives around gold because we couldn't wire $100 million of gold between New York and Tokyo or New York and London in a few minutes. And as soon as we did that, it became corrupted in a way. So Bitcoin is digital gold. If you wanted gold, you would want gold that nobody could mine. You would want gold that no one could hypothecate. You would want gold that you could place with any of 100,000 custodians, not a dozen. You would want gold where you could store it for a nickel instead of, how much money does it cost to store $1 billion of gold in Fort Knox or in a bank in Manhattan? It would cost you huge amounts of money. You want gold you can move. It would cost you $300,000 to move $100 million of gold from New York to London, but it would only cost you $5 to move $100 million of Bitcoin. And ultimately, you want gold. Can you take $1 billion of gold, dematerialize it, and put it in your head? No, you can't. But Bitcoin would be $1 billion of gold that moves at the speed of light, that can be programmed such that one computer can talk to another computer 100 million times while you're sleeping. That's a much better way to materialize money. So if God was designing gold in cyberspace, God would design Bitcoin. It's better gold. By the way, you audit it every 10 minutes, right? So it's not corruptible. It is transparent. It does move at the speed of light. It has no mass. It transcends the laws of physics. And the laws of physics make gold defective as a store of value in the 21st century. Anna, it was defective as a store of value in the 20th century because I couldn't take $1 billion of gold and ship it to Turkey on Saturday afternoon, loan it out for 4 hours and fetch it back. And so the velocity of the money slows down exponentially when I encapsulate it in 3,000 pounds of gold on a pallet in the fifth sub-basement of a bank vault, right? It would take me literally probably a year of planning to move $1 billion of gold from one custodian in one country to another custodian in another country. And so what that means is that any entity with money is at a disadvantage to the counterparties that custody the gold, and that makes it just too slow. So Bitcoin is just a million times better than gold. If you like the idea of a non-sovereign, bearer instrument, non-fiat store of value, and you've thought about gold, then Bitcoin would be better across every dimension. And that's why Bitcoin is generating a 200% price appreciation per year for the past 10 years. And gold is 1/10 to 1/20th that much.
So, I mean, there's so many things and we don't have enough time, but just thinking, a lot of it, you mentioned, obviously, clearly gold is different from Bitcoin when you have to move it and the physical costs it involves to move it around the world. But, the financial industry now apparently, and many more firms are setting up, custodians for Bitcoin and all of this other infrastructure around it. So how are you sure that it's not going to become not as expensive, because obviously you don't have to pay money to move it and ship it, but, that it will actually still remain, economical and or
when handling money, if you're handling $1 billion, you have to be careful, right? $1 billion of gold weighs 30,000 pounds. $1 billion of Bitcoin has no weight. So how many counterparties in the world can handle $1 billion? How rapidly are they evolving? You, Anna, could hold $1 billion of Bitcoin in the palm of your hand. In fact, not only could you have a dozen different ways to do it. And if you didn't choose to do it, there are 1 million other people on this planet that could do it for you. Now, I'm not saying that it isn't dangerous to hold $1 billion of money in your hand. It is. What I'm saying is, if I took the weight and the mass out of the $1 billion, and if I made it possible to program it on a computer, and if I drove down the cost of computer hardware and computer software by orders of magnitude, and if I made it possible for you to change your mind every day and move the $1 billion to a different custodian for $5, you would have optionality. And now you'd be harnessing Moore's law and the power of software. And you would find the highest common denominator on the planet. You will find the single best custodian that you trust the most on the day when you have a certain problem in order to custody your money. And that's an option you have with Bitcoin because it is software. It's not an option you have with gold. You don't have 1,000 choices as to where you custody gold, and they're not updating their services every 3 months, right? And so gold is the entire infrastructure for custody of gold is much more cumbersome. It's much slower developing. Your counterparty risk is much higher. and your negotiating leverage as an individual on this planet is much less. I mean, if we take this to the extreme, for example, 1 billion people can own Bitcoin, and they can move the Bitcoin from custodian to custodian. They have choice. How many of those billion people can go into a large bank and get the bank to agree to custody their gold for them, right? And at what price? And I mean, the answer, of course, is that 99.9% of the people on the planet don't qualify to even get their gold custodied by a major bank. They couldn't afford it. It's too cumbersome. So what we're talking about is optionality that comes from exponentially decreasing cost and exponentially increasing functionality, because at the end of the day, Bitcoin is programmable gold. And we all know people that have iPhones have more power in the palm of their hand than NASA had in the space shuttle that sent people into orbit 40 years ago. If we can put digital gold onto a mobile device, we can give the individual, all 6 billion people with a mobile phone, more custodial power and more control over their financial sovereignty than we could give a billionaire in the 20th century using gold as the method of store of value. And that's what this is all about.
So let me ask one last question, because we've kind of run out of time, and I feel like I have to, even though it seems odd given your passion and how you thought this is through. But, you know, I guess skeptics from the outside would say, hey, look at this listed company. They're just trying to ride the Bitcoin rally wave. They're going to mention Bitcoin, their stock price goes up. Like, you know, during the ICO boom, there was the Long Island Tea Company. So what do you say to that without, you know, scaring us that the world is ending again and that our only way to save ourselves is Bitcoin?
You know, I was an early investor in Amazon, and investors used to say, oh, Amazon, they're just trying to ride the internet wave. It's just a faddish company talking about internet retail. And Amazon stock crashed over and over again, and nobody believed in Amazon. Well, I was an early investor in Apple, and people said, oh, Apple, you know, they failed in the PC business against Microsoft, and now they're just trying to ride the phone business. What is this iPhone? This is a toy. If you go back and look at what the press said in 2007 about the iPhone, they said, oh, well, Apple, they're just trying to change the subject. What is the iPhone? Is nothing. Well, you know, and I think Apple and Amazon turned out okay. And with regard to this, I actually believe the future is a digital monetary network. Amazon believed the future was a digital retail network. Apple believed the future was a digital mobile network. Facebook believed in a digital social network. Twitter believed in a digital speech network. If you believe in the future of a digital network that's going to dematerialize something critical to billions of people, then you invest in it. So we're invested in a digital monetary network. I believe it's the solution to a $100 trillion problem, and it's going to make life better for billions of people. Yes, we're invested in it. We're not ashamed of it. We're a publicly traded company. Amazon was a publicly traded company when they were investing in digital internet retail, and a lot of people made fun of them. They made fun of them every year. 20 years running. You could find people still skeptical of Amazon 20 years after they came public. In fact, the stock was trading at 1/3 or 1/4 of what it is right now if you roll the clock back 4 years. Plenty of skeptics. Either the future is going to be digital or it isn't. And if the future is a digital monetary network, we're right and they'll be wrong. And yes, I believe that the future is a digital monetary network, and Bitcoin is that network.
All right. Oh, you've rallied the troops. Thanks so much for your time, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
Scale is natively connected to Ethereum and the entire Ethereum ecosystem. Scale is built to power the generational leap in blockchain adoption. dApps built on Ethereum plus Scale will provide a frictionless experience along with high speed, openness, global reach, security, and privacy, all while staying truly decentralized.
Thank you, Michael and Anna. Whether you're interested in Bitcoin from a store of value, payments, or speculative perspective, for those who haven't made the jump, there's definitely a lot of reasons to own Bitcoin right now.
That's right. But remember, everyone, that is not financial advice coming from Lindy. So, next we have a panel that's going to be relevant to many of you watching. As companies decentralize and look to hire more remote workers, work as we know it is on the verge of changing forever. What will the future of work look like? Who gets to participate? And how will organizations stay efficient when working from home becomes the new norm for people all around the world? Our panelists will answer these questions and more in The Future of Work, moderated by Aaron Kohalila, the founder of EAK Digital.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having us for this exciting panel. This panel is The Future of Work. It's a very interesting panel actually, especially during these unprecedented times, as they like to say. I think the future of work has been accelerated, I think, because of the pandemic. So I'm really excited to hear from three leading projects in the blockchain industry and how they are at the forefront of the future of work. So we have 30 minutes for this panel. So we'll make it. We'll have some brief introductions, and then we'll get started. So thanks everyone for coming. I hope you're enjoying Binance Blockchain Week. Thank you to all the Binancians who have made this possible. And so we'll just kick off. So my name's Aaron. I'm the founder and CEO of EAK Digital. We're a leading blockchain and a marketing and PR firm, in the space. I'm also the organizer of the Istanbul Blockchain Week and the Blockdown Virtual Conference. So we'll just go around the virtual panel now to give some brief 60-second introductions, and then we'll jump into the questions. So Josh, would you like to begin?
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. Great to be here. My name's Josh Goodbody. I'm the Regional Director for EMEA at Binance. We have got a lot to talk about today around remote working and being a remote-first company. So it's a pleasure to be here and very much looking forward to dive into it.
Thanks, Josh. Jeremy, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name is Jeremy Hollister. I'm the head of people success at the Maker Foundation. And the Maker Foundation has been around for about 3 years with a primary goal of bootstrapping MakerDAO, the DeFi project I'm sure that many folks have heard about. So we have about 90 people across 25 countries helping get that decentralized autonomous organization up and running.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. And Key, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Juan. You can call me Mark. So I'm the co-founder and the COO of Dodo. I was an early crypto investor since 2013. I studied computer science in college with a technical background. So before Dodo, I worked for another crypto project, DOS Network, which is a decentralized Oracle network. So my partners and I founded Dodo last year. And Dodo is a brand new but popular DeFi project in China. So it's a decentralized exchange powered by our original PMM algorithm. So we can provide an excellent aggregator transaction experience and the most convenient new asset issuance platform. So we are backed by lots of strong ventures like Binance Labs and Coinbase Ventures. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, like I said, really excited to have all three of you on the panel here today. I think all three projects that are on this panel are clearly in different areas of growth, kind of in their respective rights. So I think it's going to be interesting to learn more about your work organization and your culture, and how you see that kind of playing out in the future of work. So obviously this pandemic has accelerated many of the kind of remote working aspects. I would say that a lot of us in the blockchain industry have been working remotely already for a long time. But I'm really interested to see kind of what adaptations, if any, and any trends that you've really seen during this period and how it's kind of affected your organizations.
Sure. I'm happy to kick this off if you'd like. So we at Binance have been quite fortunate during this period in that we're very much a remote first company. So the whole philosophy of Binance has very much been around decentralizing, the financial space as well as decentralizing the way people work. Now, because of the pandemic, scaling a company up, growing people, getting people into new roles globally, and doing that on a remote first basis has been the first order of business. So getting as much talent in as quick a requirement as we've had because of the growing industry. So really hiring a lot of people at a really fast pace, good quality people that can get up and running completely remotely has been our number one focus. And that's fine, I would say, for companies that are slightly smaller, that have, between 5 to 50 people. But we were doing that on a scale of, we were then about 450 people to where we are now, which is 1,500. So the challenge that we've had is maintaining that kind of quality of execution whilst we've been building out the size of the company. And what we've really found is the level of interest in how we do that has increased pretty exponentially. A lot of people come to us from traditional companies and go, how are you scaling this global organization so quickly in this remote first world that we're in? You can't shake a hand and sit down across a table from someone that you're hiring for key, really important roles in the company. You've got to all do it over Zoom or Google Meet or whatever video chat device you're doing it on. So you've got to really find the kind of organizational muscle memory to be able to interview people, to deduce the kind of skills and talents that they have, and find a way to really get to the bottom of whether these people and you as a company are the right place for each other. So for us, it's a theme that we're really glad people have slowly woken up to, the fact that you can have a large global company and be more or less completely remote. And the level of interest in that we see increasing exponentially. And the pandemic, unfortunately, isn't going anywhere. So people are looking at this as not a short-term phenomena. It's very much something that's here to stay, and people will have to adapt to.
Just to build on Josh's point, I think it's not only bringing people in, but also engaging them, which can be very difficult. I think any relationship is built on connection, which can be difficult in a 20 to 60-minute Zoom or Google Meet meeting. So it's also a facilitating opportunity for people to connect outside of the scope of a project and delivering. So one of the things that we've explored in many different ways and different levels is teams coming together and having water cooler discussions and topics outside of the project that they're delivering, and hosting those, ideally not in the middle of the night for everyone. I think time zones are certainly not going to go away, but I think that focus has really helped bring people together, because this is definitely an industry and a sector that we've seen where people traveled all over the world and met continuously in different places. And once that was shut down, I think that connection issue has been one of the biggest challenges. So it is having those sort of facilitating the ability for people to continue to connect, even if it is online.
Yeah, and
our organization is global and remotely at the first day. So even though that we are young, so we started to hire people since last July, but we have a great decentralized spirit. So our organization is totally remotely and decentralized. So we are in Beijing, Shanghai, Hangzhou, Xi'an, Chengdu, US, Canada, Australia. So even though we are not a very big team like Binance or Maker, but we still have totally working in a remote style. So, due to this remote work, you have flexible time to balance your job and life. So this is the advantage. But on the other side, you have to guarantee the efficiency, especially the communication efficiency. So it's difficult for a remote team. So we use a set of communication tools to work with each other every day, including Slack, Notion, Asana, and Google Docs, and so on. So they are all great tools, and we have daily stand-up meeting, weekly meeting, and a monthly retrospective meeting. So yes, I like this company culture, and I think that is pretty suited for a blockchain company.
Yeah. I think it's really important that all members of the team feel connected and part of a team. I think all of us are suffering in one way or another when it comes to like isolation, like especially all the lockdowns that we're all facing. So I do think now more than ever it's really important for the culture and for the to place importance on the culture and the people within it and make sure they can connect with each other. So it's great to hear from what your three companies are doing. And then just to kind of move away from that, you've all said that you have employees located all over the world, which is super interesting, and it must be fascinating to connect with so many different people from different cultures. So what I was wondering for the next question really was, how have these working styles, which are now moving forward into the kind of future of work, like how have they differed really, like from your employees out in Asia or in China, or compared to like the kind of American or Western, should we say, employees? Like have they adapted in the same way? Do they accept different types of ways of working? And have you noticed any different there, any trends in comparison to each other?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. I think to your point, there's certainly a lot of different national cultures that exist. We have people in 25 different countries and probably 30 plus nationalities just across 90 people. So you do have a lot of diversity of thought and background. And I think one of the great things is having folks that are geographically disparate on the same team. And that presents challenges, but also opportunities to think about things in a different way. And so it's one of the things that we've had to be mindful about when it comes to engaging with teams and ensure that we don't have just one view of the world. So we may have a lot of developers in the US who also work with their Polish counterparts. And so part of that is understanding what's the best use of tools and focused on the goals and the strategies so that everyone comes along. I think time zones can be one of the biggest issues. Not all of us work best when it's the middle of the night. So I think that asynchronous communication has really come into play. And also looking for people that have worked, even if it's in different industries, I think having that baseline skill set of working across cultures becomes important too.
Yeah, just to add to that, Jeremy, the approach we've taken around, how to encourage people to work, in a team where they are spread across completely different time zones, regions, and have all different kind of cultural sensitivities around, how they perceive they should work within a remote team. The key for us has been a bit of flexibility. So giving people the ability to, set themselves up in a way that suits their team. And that sounds so simple and basic, but what we tend to see, especially the feedback from people that have joined us from other companies, even smaller and larger companies, that the remote first working culture can be quite rigid, i.e. there are certain things you need to do, check into a certain app, be present at a certain time of the day, on a certain device. There are rigid structures that have been set up to capture and give a little bit of discipline to remote working. But actually, what we found is that can actually not reflect the way that certain teams want to work. So, one of the things that we've learned very quickly is giving people and teams the ability to figure out what tools that they want to use to be able to work efficiently. It's been one of the key things in giving people a sense of ownership. And a sense of kind of belonging, that they're part of this team that, albeit doesn't sit around a table very often, sits around a video call every day or every week. We don't tell people you need to have weekly team meetings. It's up to them. Some people have team meetings every day. Some people have team meetings every 2 weeks. Really depends on what they're trying to achieve as a team. So that flexibility and being conscious that teams can work in different ways, and there isn't one preset cookie cut formula that you can give to a company and give to a team around how they should work remotely, has been a realization that we've come to recently, and I think people are learning that as well.
Yeah, I think the culture in West and East are totally different. So I think in West is more open and flexible. So you just need to complete your work and make sure that you have output. I think that's enough. But in China, in Asia, especially in China, so the work time is pretty restrictive. So maybe you have to check in when you go to the office and check out when you leave. But as I mentioned, that just due to this pandemic, I think the style in Asia or in East already changed. So more and more company become more open and flexible. So most company have a period to remote have a period of remotely work and maybe online work. I think that's make the things change. I think maybe in future this trend will stay. I think more and more company will be more open, especially for the blockchain company.
Awesome. So we've seen, in the recent years, this big rise of the gig economy. It's been well publicized, at least here in the UK. This change of different working styles that's been accepted. How do you think that kind of gig worker mindset and type of working style is going to evolve over the next months and years? Jeremy, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, I think MakerDAO in particular has illustrated this. I think one of the first things we need to point out is the difference between a decentralized and a distributed team. So decentralized is essentially what authority or decision making is made. And is it centralized or decentralized? A lot of our companies, for instance, now might have centralized decision making, even though the people sit around the world. And even the makeup of our organizations can include employees who have employment contracts in various countries or consulting contractors, for instance. You have a mix of different people. With the gig economy, it is sort of you own your schedule, you own the work that you're doing. And we've seen that in places like Uber and various delivery services. But one of the things we're seeing in a DAO is the fact that decision-making is decentralized. There is no one person or a group of people that controls the decision-making. Moreover, that the participants in a DAO also come to the DAO as individuals, or they may represent companies, but there are various types of folks that join. And everyone has a vote based off of their participation in the MakerDAO, for instance. And so what we're seeing is shifting away from people working for companies themselves and working directly for the DAO and receiving remuneration in whatever form that is to do distinct projects or to help with an overall structure or infrastructure. So we're actually in the midst of a lot of folks within the DAO taking over work that we had begun to get it started, and now they're off on their own and own the type of work that they're doing, and they can work across multiple projects as well. So I think that's the biggest shift that we're seeing, is that you do have individuals working for DAOs as opposed to working for companies as a traditional employee.
Yeah, this is one of the fascinating things that DeFi has brought to the industry, the fact that you can have non-employees contributing to projects, to protocols, to initiatives on a very much decentralized basis. So, great example, someone submits a proposal for something to a DAO. The DAO votes to accept that proposal, and with that comes a plan to execute it. And that might involve 2 or 3 people doing a certain piece of project work. And that shift in how things are executed and built has been really front and center of the DeFi evolution from being something quite niche to coming into the crypto mainstream. So the gig economy, as we call it, is very well suited to the DeFi sector. Now, the gig economy, if you zoom out and look at what that really means in the wider economic sense, it has, to be fair, quite negative connotations, at least in Europe. The gig economy is something that is connected with a lack of work should we say, certainty, so stability. You're not on a permanent contract. You haven't got all the benefits that come with that. And to a certain extent, that's fair. We've seen, large companies using so-called gig workers, so 0-hour contracts or contractors, to fulfill essentially what's the role of a permanent employee. Now, the gig economy in a crypto space is completely different in my view. It's very much an empowering concept where people can put their hands up and go, right, I'd like to contribute and work on this thing. And as we've all said, have control of their working schedule in doing so. So the gig economy in crypto is almost a very humanist-like concept where people, retain the sovereignty over their own time, their efforts, what they're contributing to, and are able to volunteer and put their hands up to work on certain things collaboratively with other like-minded people. So this DeFi space we're in is super new, but as it gets even bigger and more people are conscious and are getting involved in the DeFi space, the concept of the gig economy within crypto will hopefully continue growing. And there very much is a place for those kind of arrangements within the crypto space because it fits really well with what companies and projects are trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think I still have this feeling. So especially in this more and more like community driven projects emerge. So right now, so like a person is a small studio, so they can complete some like plugin features or independent features. So especially in some community-driven projects. So even in some venture-backed projects, so we still can publish some feature bounty. So some independent worker, they can pick up some job to get the token as a reward to complete some plugin features. I think this is also a new style, just cooperation models between the employee and the employer. Yeah. So as I know that many projects have some part-time employee. So I think that's also the proof of this style. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think in some ways, the blockchain industry and companies in our space has largely been working in a decentralized and remote-based working way before the pandemic struck. So I'm interested really for three of you that do work in this area of the industry. Like, do you think that the blockchain companies are already kind of at the forefront of the future of work? And do you see blockchain companies kind of almost being an example to other companies to show how those can be implemented to more traditional industries?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment that what we tend to see in the blockchain space are companies being much more receptive and built in the mindset to be comfortable to have a global team working remotely. There may be certain functions that choose not to have a remote team structure. A good example of that could be a compliance function, but very much, as an industry, you tend to see these crypto companies and blockchain companies really being comfortable with the concept of remote teams and remote companies. So because of that, I think it's a fair assumption to make that philosophically, the kind of people that end up getting involved in the blockchain space are much more comfortable with the idea that teams can deliver and deliver well when they're not in the same place. And with that kind of, I guess, philosophical vein running through the industry, the blockchain space to me does seem like a really, really good case study, or at least a pioneer of remote working culture working very, very well. The blockchain space pumps out products and services at a scale that other industries, look at and go, how are these guys achieving this so quickly? How are they moving so fast in a sector that's requiring a lot of technological expertise that is frequently done very centrally, that is now being done on a much more decentralized basis. So, it's going to be a useful case study for traditional industries to look at how these large companies are doing what they're doing on a remote first basis. And I think the blockchain space will continue to be the inspiration for that, albeit, perhaps the blockchain space moves so quickly that conveying those lessons learned is going to be the challenge. So it's going to be, imperative for people wanting to enter the space to come to the blockchain industry and go, guys, how do you do this? How have you set yourself up in this way? So, I think the blockchain space is very much leading from the front on this.
Yeah, I think I have a unique position in that I worked for a company, Cisco Systems, 10 and 15 years ago, and they created technology, WebEx, that they bought 12 years ago. So I was working remotely and using this type of technology even 12 years ago. I think the difference with blockchain is that it started out as being remote because we had all of these people in a community that was very enthusiastic about blockchain, and they were distributed all over the world. So technology had certainly evolved since then. Just in the last 12 months, the forcing function of people having to stay home, whereas we were, I think, better positioned for that, being as separate as we were, helped accelerate the acceptance. And now I think there are a lot more people that are willing to go into roles that hadn't, they were sort of stuck with the office and the concept of the office. So I think what will help us in the near future is folks that are now willing to say, yes, I can balance working from home as well as my the other parts of my life. I think the key piece will be ensuring that we can help people educate themselves on what is blockchain and how to get into it, because I think that's one of the biggest barriers that people have, is understanding what it does. So now that we have the first wave of first movers, so to speak, and we're starting to grow and go beyond our sector, I think that education piece will be key. And now that we have removed that barrier of being able and willing to work remotely.
Yeah, I think so. As I mentioned, that the blockchain company has the decentralized gene. So especially we have so many governance-based and community-based project today. So I think this style is the advanced company organization style. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. So okay. So other than obviously remote working, it would be great if maybe you could all give me or give us one specific example or initiative that your companies are kind of implementing that are designed to enable employees to deliver, remote employees to deliver better work at the moment.
Sure, happy to give that a crack. I think one of the key things we've learned in scaling a global remote company is expectations, setting expectations very early and communicating those in a crystal clear way. And it sounds very basic, but something so simple as setting, for example, OKRs. So, what are your objectives and what are your key results within that? Setting those at a relatively frequent interval. So, I come from the traditional finance space. I've worked in different banks and asset managers most of my career, and you tend to get a big chunk of time for your yearly objectives or your 6-month objectives. In this remote environment, that doesn't really fit very well. So the approach that we've taken is to break down people's working year into smaller chunks. So let's say a quarter. So every employee will understand on a quarterly basis what their deliverables are. What are their key objectives? What are their kind of pillars that they're looking to achieve? And then within those pillars, breaking out and identifying what the key results are within those pillars. And that gives people something to aim at on a short-term basis, keeps them focused, and it sets the expectation at a company level. And everyone can be much more accountable for what their deliverables are. So at a very high level, in a nutshell, clear and concise setting of expectations. And that, from a Binance perspective, is what we do via our OKR system. And our OKR setting on a quarterly basis allows us to both at a company level and an employee level, stay accountable to each other.
Yeah, I think one of the unique aspects of working while in a pandemic has been productivity has ironically shot up pretty immensely. And that's because people don't have commute times and they actually can't go out and socialize. So we found a lot of people spending a lot more time at work, which you think is great because you can accomplish a lot. But we also saw burnout that happens, within 3 to 6 months of all of this. So part of this was also setting boundaries, believe it or not. It's great to be productive and get things done, but you have to do it at a sustainable level. And that's one of the things that we learned from people coming to us and saying, hey, I'm doing nothing but working. So how do you help people know when to stop so that they can sustain the work as opposed to delivering on everything? And I think it's back to Josh's point. How do you set those expectations on what absolutely must be done versus what can wait? So I think it's that balance that has really come into play over the last, certainly the last 6 months, in saying, hey, you don't have to work 24 hours a day. It's important to have that balance in life too.
Yeah, I think besides that, I would like to emphasize that the company need to build a big vision for your employees. So I mean that your company or your project should just pursue a big goal. So the employee should feel that their work is meaningful. That no one wants to just work every day, but it doesn't have any value, right? Even though they have a high pay, right? So they need to feel that the stuff they are working on can change the industry or even change the world. So that's why we insist that the blockchain industry, we need innovation. Yeah, we need original things. So the copy paste is pointless. So the market will pay for new. So we need innovation. So that's what Dodo keep doing. So the PMM algorithm is completely original, and we keep to find new use case based on this algorithm. In the first version product, we pursue more efficient liquidity and less loss in the market making. In the version 2, we want to focus on the lowering the barrier of new asset issuance, make on-chain liquidity more efficient, and optimize the user experience. In version 3, maybe, so our plan is to just make NFT liquidity greater. So we are trying to just find new things and innovative things and bring this good idea into the industry. I think that's also another good point for the employee. So they will have expectation in the company. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, unfortunately, it looks like we're running out of time. We've hit the 30-minute mark, so I'd love to discuss this, further for a little bit longer, but we're unable to, unfortunately. So, thank you for your time on the panel today, guys. I'm sure people watching this has learned something. I know I certainly have, as to how to better run our companies in a remote and decentralized manner. So. Yeah, Josh, Jeremy, and Chi, thank you so much for joining us. And guys, enjoy the rest of Binance Blockchain Week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a great session. Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing. We're definitely seeing more organizations explore fully decentralized work setups, or at least a hybrid working model between home and the office. Of course, there's a ton of compatibility here with the blockchain ethos as well. Perhaps the future of work is decentralized. All right, we're halfway through today's event and still have so much to cover. Brenton, what do we have next?
Well, Lindy, up next we have a keynote presentation on Web3 and the future of the internet, hosted by Juan Benet, founder and CEO of Protocol Labs. Welcome, Juan.
Hello, everyone. I wish I could be there with you to celebrate Blockchain Week. My name is Juan Benet, and I'm here to talk to you about upgrading the internet. So I want to talk to you about how Web3 is the future of the internet, how a next wave of Web3 is coming very soon, how IPFS and Falcon are upgrading the app platform, and how this ecosystem has a huge explosive growth. So first, I want to talk about why Web3 matters. You can think of Web3 as a progression of the internet, the next important revolution in the internet. In 80 years, computing has transformed humanity. We now have superpowers beyond the imagination of our ancestors. Nobody could have predicted that we could be talking live across the world and spending most of our time in different kinds of applications that are interconnected to services and systems around the world. Think of the computing infrastructure of today having billions of humans connected to trillions of computers, living and working together, deeply integrated. Most human activity is associated and assisted by computers. So the internet is constantly granting us new superpowers. Think of all the different kinds of applications that you use day to day. And there's even larger changes coming, different kinds of interfaces like augmented reality, virtual reality, brain-machine interfaces, and so on are coming. So because of how important all of these platforms are, it's really important that we make sure that our systems are secure. Think of all of the different challenges as these new platforms will present. Think of all the different kinds of applications that will come in the future. All of that data today is hosted by centralized parties who don't give you verifiability and who don't give you certain assurances about the security of the data. So this is what Web3 is changing. Web3 is bringing verifiability to the entire internet. It's bringing it in different layers of the stack, from currency to storage to transactions to all different kinds of parts of the computing infrastructure. You can think of Web3 as a combination of different systems. Think of blockchains, the decentralized web, linked data, and so on. I won't talk much more about what Web3 is. If you're interested, I've given some talks in the past that define it more thoroughly. So now, Bitcoin kicked off the beginning of Web3, but now there's a very important new wave of Web3 coming. So you can think of, in the beginning, Bitcoin was pretty good at a lot of things. Everybody was very excited about this system. But over time, kind of by 2012, we had been hitting the limits of what this platform could do. That's when Ethereum came in to dramatically increase certain parts of the system. So it increased the transaction, it decreased the transaction time, added throughput, added dramatically better programming languages, and so on. Around the same time, IPFS began as a project to decentralize the web. And so Ethereum and IPFS together, along with a number of other projects, kicked off a very important wave of Web3. Lots of different kinds of systems and applications have been built on these technologies. So you can think of the last 3 years or so as just a dramatically explosive period with all different kinds of applications. Nowadays, there's new parts of the system that are now kind of slow for these days. So we're really hitting the limits of transactions and blockchains. We really need drastically more scalable systems. We need to move off of wasteful proof of work. And we want to be able to store full applications and be able to serve static assets and have kind of like a Web 2 style experience in Web 3. So you can think of Ethereum 2, of Filecoin, and a number of other blockchains as bringing in the next wave of Web 3. And so you can think of all of the different important primitives and systems that are being built that haven't been built for the last couple of years. Think of Polkadot, think of Tezos, and many others that together with Ethereum are improving the transaction part of the system. So think of drastically more scalable transaction systems, new languages, sharding, and so on. At the same time, Filecoin is coming to change the consensus layer of the network to add proof of storage based consensus, and to also provide a system that can give you exabytes of storage to host and distribute applications. We need to be able to have an application platform that behaves like Web 2, where you can have rich applications stored and served through a decentralized platform. So let's talk about IPFS for a moment. IPFS makes the web work peer-to-peer. You can think of the fundamental improvement is to move from location addressing to content addressing. And there's a ton of different applications around the world that are using IPFS already, from many different blockchain systems and blockchain applications to even decentralized identity systems like Microsoft Ion and other systems. So think of one of the big things that's been happening in IPFS recently is that now there's tons of people hosting websites and dApps on IPFS that then connect to some name system, either through ENS or unstoppable domains or systems like that. And there's a whole distribution pipeline set up for building these kinds of applications. Also, DeFi is powered by IPFS in an important way. Most of the DeFi applications have a front end that is hosted on IPFS, and then the back end is hosted on Ethereum. So you can think of IPFS and Ethereum working together to power most of DeFi. Then there are now really rich consumer applications like Audios, who are bringing high quality experiences, consumer experiences to these systems. Audios is built again with Ethereum on IPFS. And now it's a cross-platform system that has even mobile apps and desktop and web apps, and you can have a really high-quality music experience. It's kind of, I think, one of the first applications that is hitting like the Web 2 level quality bar in Web 3. And then there's also kind of fundamental infrastructure systems like Microsoft Ion, which is a decentralized identity system built again with IPFS. Here, Ion also uses Bitcoin. And the usage of IPFS is growing every year. So there's been tons of adoption in terms of lots of applications and users hosting websites and content. And also, we're now seeing really important browser adoption. So many browsers are now enabled to IPFS in some capacity. The most important one is Brave, which added full embedding of an IPFS node directly in the browser, and that's the most powerful integration out there. And the second most important one is Opera, which brings around 200 million users in Opera Android to IPFS. So here's a snapshot of Brave working. You can have the actual IPFS addresses directly on the browser, and it works out of the box, which is a pretty amazing thing. So now I want to talk about Filecoin for a moment, and for that I'll just share a share screen. So I'll let this play because it's a pretty good explanation of the system. And you can view this animation if you go to filecoin.io in your computers. Okay, great. Hopefully that gave you a good understanding of how Filecoin works. And now back to the presentation. So the mission of Filecoin is to build a decentralized, efficient, and robust foundation for humanity's information. It's all about building this decentralized platform where anybody can store anything for other people through cryptocurrency. So you can think of many different kinds of problems addressed by Filecoin, from decentralizing the cloud to optimizing storage services to making sure that your data and your applications survive long after the creators. And so that we can create a much more verifiable platform for the storage of our applications. Filecoin is a pretty large system. There's all kinds of different aspects to it. There's a protocol on a network. There's a blockchain that builds a decentralized market. And with that, we can create a storage cloud. And then on that storage cloud, we can build an application platform. All of this is mediated by a decentralized economy. And in that economy, there's a large ecosystem of participants that are building all kinds of things. And of course, everything is open source. Now, if you can think of a business case of Filecoin this way. So think of the vast amount of data on the planet as growing exponentially. So every year we're storing dramatically more data than we did in prior years. But there's only a small fraction of the data that we generate being stored today. So a vast amount of the data is actually deleted. So our storage platforms today are not keeping up with the demand for storage. So if we were able to create a storage platform that could store a much larger fraction of the data, we could create a ton more value. This is sort of like a classic business disruption innovation paradigm, where when you manage to drop the price of some commodity dramatically, then it suddenly starts getting used for all kinds of things that it wasn't being used before. So today in 2021, to be a good storage provider in kind of the Web 2 world, this is all of the things that a storage provider has to do. You have to have lots of disks and tape. You have to be a good server administrator. You have to have a good competitive pricing, good connectivity, and so on. And on top of that, you have to build a solid business. You have to do customer support. You have to have good marketing, good sales, and so on. So this is sort of what Filecoin is coming to abstract out. We think of this in terms of creating a set of shared services provided by all of the miners in the network that then users are using directly. So it drastically decreases the amount of work that storage providers have to do. You can think of it a little bit like a market like Airbnb, where various different participants bring in the supply of some service, and together in that market work together to provide an extremely high quality service. So think of Airbnb as competing with the very large hotel chains, but it is a market that together is weaving together the activity of all these players. So you can think of Filecoin the same way. You can think of all of the Filecoin miners together competing with a large centralized cloud. So this is sort of like the large three cloud companies out in some of the world. And you can think of all of the smaller participants as being brought together to compete against the large players. And Filecoin is built as an economy. So there's various different classes of participants that are work together to provide this service. So the main service storage is provided and mediated by the use of the Filecoin token. And the vision of Filecoin is to enable any kind of participant to bring their storage into the network, from small mining rigs to large-scale data centers. Filecoin miners are all across the spectrum. There's small miners with just tens of terabytes, and now really large miners that have hundreds of petabytes and who are planning to deploy exabytes. Great. So now I want to talk to you about IPFS and the Filecoin ecosystem and the growth we've seen in the last few months. IPFS was launched 3 years ago. Filecoin was launched last year as the incentivized storage layer. And even in the last few months, we've seen tremendous growth across the ecosystem. First off, the network the Filecoin network is live and providing tons of storage. There's been a tremendous amount of growth, and a lot of different participants are bringing storage online around the world. So there's mining communities in all continents. There's especially strong representation in China. And you can see the network size here and sort of the growth. This is the storage power the network growing. We're now pushing 2.3 MB in just 5 months, which is a truly staggering amount of storage. This is a tremendous size for a network, and this is now starting to be competitive with centralized cloud systems. And this is just in 5 months. So this is the power of the incentive layer of Filecoin. Now, it's interesting to see that the growth rate of the network is actually rate limited now by chain bandwidth. So the storage network is growing as fast as the chain allows. And now we're hitting those chain bandwidth limits. And there's a lot more storage interest that is waiting to be added to the network. So this is one important area of growth for an improvement for the community. Just drastically improve and increase the chain bandwidth. And there's a whole bunch of changes that are going to come to the protocol over the next year to open that up and allow even faster growth. And so here's a snapshot at the kind of gas utilization of the network. So this is the network is handling tens of thousands of messages, I think per day, and these are kind of most of that is in storage proofs for the storage, and the utilization of the network is around 100%. So this is kind of like total chain saturation. I want to throw a quick plug for EIP 1559. It works great for Filecoin. We've been running with the chain at full capacity and just tons of storage being onboarded. And so this is the chain is full. And even so, there aren't long delays for messages that are really important and need to get in soon. So EIP 1559 is working really well. So now deals. So the Filecoin network focused strongly on building up capacity in the first few months. Now it's turning its eyes towards users and clients and applications and so on. And here, this is a snapshot looking at the deals in the network. So there's about almost 5 petabytes of storage used by various different clients. And you can see here the growth rate. This is kind of a graph that's 2 weeks old. But I can't wait to show this graph again in 6 months to see how much this has grown. And right now it's very natural that the storage capacity grows much faster and earlier because that's where the network focused its attention. But now the next stage of the network is to focus on attracting lots of different users to add storage. So this means that the storage on Filecoin is super cheap for users out there. So if you are a prospective user that has lots of data, come to Filecoin and store it with the network. And this growth is rate limited by new applications getting traction, users and developers learning the platform. There's a lot of people learning about Filecoin now, and people building better and better tooling. So Filecoin is not just software. It is a large ecosystem of players working together towards the common goal of providing this storage platform for the world. You can learn about many of the people out there through many of the conferences that have happened. And I wanted to give you a snapshot of a few of the different groups in the ecosystem. So let's start with miners. There's close to, I think, probably over 100 or 200 different organizations mining Filecoin in different capacities. So organizations of just one person and up to whole companies that have pretty sophisticated systems and pretty sophisticated operations. You can see their facilities are extremely professional data center quality. So this is pretty exciting and pretty awesome. So huge kudos to all of the miners out there that are building the infrastructure for the future. Another really good data point is that no miner has more than 7% of the network's power. Again, this is like a slightly outdated snapshot of the distribution, but it's gotten even better with more and more competition. So it's a highly decentralized network, which is fantastic to see. And there's great geographic distribution around the world. Again, there's a pretty significant concentration, but this is getting better and better as more participants and miners are coming online around the world. What's really going to drive demand in different areas for miners is when clients come in with very significant storage deals in various different areas, because of course, where you store the data matters to clients. So for miners, kind of recommendations are to keep growing capacity, keep earning Filecoin, and think about expanding to other countries. And also, if you can, many miners are already starting to bring clients to Filecoin, so they're getting to contact all kinds of businesses and organizations that are prospective users of Filecoin and bringing them into the network. Great. So I want to talk a bit about the providers of resources in the network. So this is think of storage, media, and so on. So these participants haven't been very active in the network yet. They're mostly just kind of providers for miners and so on. But there's phenomenal opportunities for participants out there to sell the resources directly in Filecoin. Like this could be a dramatically profitable business, and to potentially give kind of significant bulk discounts to miners. So if you're if you work on the storage infrastructure, production machinery, definitely consider building this kind of system for miners. And we've also heard that some storage media organizations are considering in partnering or investing in mining companies. So that's a pretty interesting development. We've also heard of people that are considering building hardware specific for Filecoin miners. So we'll see whether that develops or not, but we'll see what happens. One of the things that I think is pretty important is to enable payments for everyday items. So this is something that I think is really critical for cryptocurrencies. People need to eat, people need to pay rent, and so on. And so one of the next important steps is to be able to use Filecoin to eat and survive around the world. So now the area that has seen the most explosive growth in the last 3 months is the developers and clients area. So this is all the people that are building applications and so on. Here's a snapshot of the ecosystem. And remember that the whole Filecoin ecosystem can store, the whole IPFS ecosystem can store their data on Filecoin. But I want to just kind of give a snapshot of a few clients that are out there. So first off is Slate, which is one of the, an extremely high quality experience as a kind of Web 2 style application where people come and add their images and data and so on and get to view it in this beautiful interface. So this is a super high quality web app that works on top of Filecoin. Another one is Fleek, which has built pretty significant infrastructure for the entire IPFS and Filecoin ecosystem, where it becomes extremely easy for people to add their websites and their storage on IPFS. They kind of like automate the whole process and be able to kind of store the Filecoin. Another great highlight is this files application from ChainSafe, which is one of the first cloud storage system aimed at kind of personal data storage. So think of kind of like a Dropbox replacement built on top of Filecoin. It's a really awesome application. Fleek storage is another application like that I think is going to be launching soon. There's a website out for it, and it looks like pretty amazing as well. So really look forward to Space, the storage application from Fleek, and ChainSafe files replacing most of our usage of Dropbox. And there are all kinds of interesting use cases for formalizing the storage market directly into thinking about the asks and bids from various different miners. So there are, I'll return to this one. There's also a really interesting integration with Ocean Protocol, which is an application that allows a whole system that allows building storage markets around or data markets around specific data sets. So people can think about selling data on Filecoin via Ocean Market, and so people can bid and sort of speculate on the value of that data. Then there are even decentralized CDN networks developing around Filecoin. So Mile is a really promising one, which is building this whole tooling and even a consumer application that you can download and run in your computer that kind of makes you part of the content delivery network for the network. There's applications like Powerloom, which are doing verified website and media history, and all of this is sort of time-stamped and backed up in the network. And there's also really promising video applications developing. So there's one really great integration with LivePeer, where they do all of the transcoding of video. And BootFi is also another application that is building a platform for storing and distributing that video. Here you can see some of the screenshots from BootFi, and they're a business now with a bunch of customers as well, which is really exciting to see. Already, like the first generation of startups built entirely on top of Filecoin growing. Huddle's another really exciting one, which is a peer-to-peer video conferencing solution. It's education focused, and one of the big important differentiators for Huddle is they're able to provide super cheap storage of all the video to their customers. So this is one of the key important things about video. Video is pretty large and adds up quick. It becomes very expensive to store, and this gives Huddle a pretty great advantage. There's also lots of great developer tooling. So Textiles PowerGate, Truffle Preserve, Infura, and Kotal are all building systems to be able to deploy and run Filecoin infrastructure. So lots of great developer tooling support. And I also want to mention there's now a bunch of interesting integrations and bridges being built. Probably the most important one is the connectivity to directly to Ethereum. So there's systems that allow now moving Filecoin from into Ethereum, but also people developing contracts to be able to call Filecoin functions from Ethereum. There's also bridges to Polkadot. This is a really exciting development as well. I think this is a super promising direction where we'd love to see Filecoin and Polkadot be used together. And there's also systems like Ethereum Classic and other networks adding support. So next for developers, there's all kinds of learning and experimentation going on right now. People building applications and integrating their applications with Filecoin storage. And people are starting to build really high quality consumer applications that feel like normal Web 2 apps now on Web 3. Probably the most exciting area for me is to really see video that is fully Web 3 powered. Video was a really fundamental challenge for many, many years. And now finally in 2021, we can do it. We have the transcoding through LivePeer, we have the storage through Filecoin, and we have the distribution through IPFS. Great. So now token holders have all kinds of tooling and support. So there's tooling and systems for hardware wallets. There's web wallets. There's even an integration in MetaMask coming with MetaMask snaps. And there's also systems to be able to plug in Filecoin to DeFi. So think of loan markets and lending markets and all kinds of things. One of the other things that's happening, which is a phenomenal development, is that there are funds starting that are now raising capital in Filecoin and investing in Filecoin applications. So they're really becoming a really critical part of the economy for Filecoin, where all of the transaction processing is happening directly in Filecoin. So one really amazing thing about the ecosystem is that it's growing a lot. So there's hundreds of teams entering the ecosystem, primarily through hackathons. So there's been a bunch of hackathons around Filecoin, with lots of people building new projects. Then from there they go on to become part of the part of accelerators that then help. Some of those teams go on to build larger and larger systems and applications, and some of them become businesses. So there's been really this amazing growth in the ecosystem in terms of programs that support the builders that go on to build businesses. So Tachyon just had an amazing demo day. Go check it out. And Filecoin Frontier is the next one. The program just started a few days ago, and looking forward to what these businesses do in the next 3 months. And like I mentioned, there's been these amazing funds that have been started from Finbushi and Huobi. So there's lots and lots of opportunities to build new ideas in 2021. There's lots of hackathons. There's going to be accelerators and grants and investors out there to support builders in the ecosystem. There's also even programs and fellowships for new miners that are wanting to get started, especially in countries that don't yet have Filecoin mining. Lots and lots to come, so keep your eyes out. Finally, I want a brief note to the community. So one of the most important things about Filecoin is that it's a fully open source system that is built by thousands of people. So the project now has over 6,000 contributors. There's a ton of momentum. Most of the development happens on GitHub and Filecoin Slack. There's 4 implementations. Lotus is the main one. Venus just joined the network and has mined its first blocks. Forest and Fuhan are joining soon. There's tons of communities around the planet. This is a really phenomenal part of the community. There's people around the world that know about Filecoin and who've been working on it and developing applications for it and so on. And so, huge shout out to all of the folks in conferences that help build the community. And also, more recently, there's been a lot of conferences online, so you can go back and check out all of the videos from these really cool conferences on the web. So for community members out there that want to kind of spread the word, think about hosting conferences, hosting hackathons, building summits, and so on. All of this activity is going to really grow a lot during 2021 and 2022. So looking forward to seeing you out there. Great. So that's it for now. There's a lot of stuff going on. Hopefully, I convinced you that Web3 is the future of the internet, that the next wave of Web3 is coming as many of these new blockchains and Filecoin come together and integrate and build a much better system together. And that Filecoin and IPFS together are upgrading the app platform of the internet, enabling Web2 quality applications to be hosted in a fully decentralized, fully verifiable way. And that the whole ecosystem is undergoing a pretty tremendous and explosive growth this year and next year. So now is a phenomenal time to get started. So I'll end with a short note saying, hey, join us and come build the future of the internet. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the blockchain week. Take care.
Seems like the Web3 ecosystem is expanding really quickly, and that's thanks in large part to some of the dApps and platforms Juan shared with us today.
Well, sadly, we're now down to our last session of the day. Next up, please welcome the CEO of the Chromia project, Henrik Herter.
Hello, I'm Henrik Herter. I'm the CEO of the Chromia project and Chromaway, who are caretakers of that source code. Today I want to talk about some new dApps coming to the Chromia project. Now you might wonder, what is Chromia? So I'll start in that direction. Chromia is a new public blockchain combining traditional databases, the ones that have been worked on for decades, that are completely dominant in the enterprise world, with blockchain security. So it's quite a novel approach to blockchain. And Chromia is something that is very easy to use for developers. They can use the powerful tools that have been used for normal applications, and it's proven to work in the real world. As well as, of course, we have better scalability and lower fees than sort of the big blockchains. So Chromia can work independently, but it can also work as a layer 2 to Ethereum. And in fact, our company Chromaway, we started off in an open source project 2012 to 2014, which had tokens on Bitcoin. But sort of, we now have to accept that Ethereum won that market. And so tokens on Ethereum is a thing. And we want to play well with Ethereum by having a layer 2. And an example of a layer 2 app on Chromia is Hedget, which is basically, you can hear it from the name, it's about hedging. So it is options for underlying cryptocurrencies, a DeFi project where tokens are on Ethereum, whereas the logic and the marketplace are on Chromia, to have something that's easy to program, faster to use, lower fees, and more scalability. But there are also projects that are sort of migrating from Ethereum to Chromia, to get the advantages. And we are now announcing a partnership with Lingon, who are a company doing certificates, but now they want to attract more in the consumer goods market, so larger bulk of transactions and a completely different scalability model. And Chromia can help compared to the previous solution by bringing down fees quite a lot, as well as having an easy to use interface for basically end users. So we also have other enterprise applications. We have a partnership with Blockhouse, a company from the Netherlands, to do real estate tokenization. We have a project called CapChap that we are doing together with a legal company to do corporate affairs and the cap table, share registry, maybe board meetings, things like that for startup companies. First, we are doing it for Sweden, or CapChap are doing it for Sweden. It's an independent company. So those are some more like serious enterprise-like applications. We also have fun apps like games. We started to do Mines of Dalarna, an action game, to prove that we can have a scalable blockchain intended for a lot of players and users. But now there are more games coming. There is a slightly different game called My Neighbor Alice that is being developed that wants to attract a larger market of sort of non-blockchain gamers. So not only blockchain geeks, but it's a builder game, quite cute, and sort of inspired of Animal Crossing, and basically it's a lot about self-expression. You get an island where you can build and create houses and do farming and meet with neighbors and do events. And it's a very social game, and it looks completely awesome, I think. So check out myneighboralice.com. Games and enterprise applications. We also have applications that are sort of building a better world. We have been working with green applications, green bonds, but also decentralized social networks such as Community. Basically doing everything we can to make this industry deliver on its promises. So that's what all from me today. Enjoy the conference, and thank you for giving me 5 minutes to talk about dApps.
Thank you, Henrik. So it sounds like Chromia is building a really promising DeFi ecosystem with some dApps we'll be looking forward to using. And folks, that's a wrap for day 3 of Binance Blockchain Week. We want to thank all of the speakers who joined us today, as well as our sponsors, Dodo, Chromia, Frontier, EasyFi Network, AWS, Stratus, Skale Network, and Marlin. So Brenton, what can our viewers look forward to on day 4?
Oh, it's been a long day, Lindy, trust me. But tomorrow, we're bringing in some trailblazing crypto founders and visionaries. And they'll be discussing topics like the lasting impact of blockchain technology on new and emerging markets, which crypto innovations to look out for, new investment trends to follow, and more. Plus, Perian Boring, founder and president of the Chamber of Digital Commerce, joins us in a fireside chat on what's around the corner for fintech and crypto economies. This and more coming up tomorrow at 10 a.m. UTC. So make sure you join us for day 4 of the Binance Blockchain Week, Founding the Future.